Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. All right. StreamYard is definitely been weird, but let's go ahead and go live on Rockfin and let's do it. Doobie-doobie-doo.
Sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Salvati.
What is going on, guys? Happy Friday. I missed you last night. I took last night off because I actually did like a 10 to 10 on Wednesday. I was on Rising, and then I also had the Julian Assange interview, which was in person. And then Eric went with me as well. We were also at the Julian Assange documentary showing at Somerville Theater. Dr. Joe Stein was there to see the movie Ithaca, and his father and son were also there for Q&A afterwards as well. So that's actually why I did not go live on Thursday night, because I had a really long day Wednesday. So I took last night off. But I am back now. So welcome to Sab's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sab's podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And you can catch me here Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. And let's go ahead and get started, guys. We will do call in tonight, since I didn't get a chance to do it last night. So I will look forward to hearing from all of your lovely voices. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and take that poll. Do you think TikTok should be banned in the US? Now, I glanced at it before I went live. I'm a little shocked by the results I saw so far, but go ahead and take that poll and we'll reveal the results later on in the show. Shout out to CBC Voter, says, happy Friday, Sabby Sabs, doobie doo. What's going on? Lawrence Johnson, who's a Sabby member, says, doobie doobie door 2024. Shout out to Skeven, says, viva la burrite. Cheers. Hey. Shout out to Hannah, says, long live France. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What's going on? Bryce says, doobie doobie doo Friday, Sabby. Greetings. Angela, who's a Sabby member, says, greetings, people. Happy Friday, and nothing should be banned but billionaires. Oh, and liberté, égalité, fraternité. Liberty, equality, brotherhood, the French motto, solidarity. Greetings, Robert Brown says, I watched the Glenn Greenwald interview on his site, and Williamson showed her ignorance of reality in the first two sentences. Brutal dictator? That was it for me. We're going to get into that, Robert. We're going to get into it. I actually changed the title because originally I had Glenn Greenwald pushes Marianne Williamson, and I didn't mean it the way some people took it. Some people were like, he's not pushing for her to run. I was like, no, that's not what I meant. I was trying to say that he was pushing her on certain issues like foreign policy, but I have a character limit, and then that was confusing. So I was like, X the word push and put in questions. Shout out to Terry Hinton, says, hello, Sabby in chat. Greetings, Dabby Dab, says, how's it going, Sabby and fam? Don't forget to show the like button some love. That's right. Go ahead and smash that like button, guys. What's up, Eric Gray, my friend? Sup, y'all? And I have a fun question for you, Sabby. Thoughts on the Lamar Jackson situation and how it should be handled or resolved? I haven't had a chance to look into that yet. I heard a little bit, but I'll have to look more into it before I give a comment. What's up, gamer says, hello Friday, or happy Friday, everyone. Shout out to Kyle. I dislike social media, but people should be allowed to have fun while the world burns in front of them. Greetings, Joe says censorship is wrong in any form. The First Amendment to the Constitution is the freedom of speech, and the government would love to take that away. Yeah, I feel you. What's going on, humanitarian class side? U.S. lawmakers questioning the TT CEO have exposed themselves for the 9th time to be the dumbest MFs on the planet. I know. I swear I don't think they use these apps at all. Shout out to the Traveler says, hello, no TikTok shouldn't be banned. Greetings, crazy boy says, hey, y'all. Shout out to Lorez says, Guten Tag, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. Help Sab out by watching the ads and smash the like. AOC continues to make herself a clown. I agree. What's up, LB says Sabby. Greetings, Long Duck Dong says hello. Oh my God, that's from 16 Candles. Oh, that is so sweet. 16 Candles is one of my favorite like 80s movies. I love movies, but I kind of have like a special, I don't know. 80s movies just touch me in a certain way. And I love like the Molly Ringwald movies. So yeah, that character is from 16 Candles. Shout out to Robert Templeton says, Guten Abend Alice. All right, everybody's getting into it tonight. Shout out to Ben, who's a Sabby member, says, hi, y'all. Greetings, Jay says, happy Friday, everyone. Greetings, Pachico says, hello to Carrie Scott. Greetings, Steve says, hi, Angela. What's up, Mastermind says, Angel. Well, all right. Greetings, Wary says, hey, everybody. Shout out to Zach says, am I early for a change? You are. You are early, Zach. You are here. And greetings, Carrie Scott. Oh, it jumped ahead. Greetings, Carrie Scott says, patch in Arizona. What's going on, Lou says, Solve. Oh, Sabby. Welcome. Shout out to Casey says, take TikTok and shit will blow. And I don't even have TikTok. And shout out to Rondo says, peace. Okay, welcome back, guys. So happy to be here. We do have a lot to discuss tonight. Really quick, I want to go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really does go a long way, at least I think so. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker as well. And we have a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Jeff Totsek. Boop, boop. Boop, boop. All right. Fun times. Okay. Like I said, we have a lot to discuss tonight. Get ready. I hope you are comfortable. Get some popcorn. Do whatever you need to do, because it's going to be a minute. Let's go ahead and share my thumbnail so you can see what we are discussing tonight. All right, tonight we are discussing Glenn Greenwald questions Marianne. He did. We're going to go over 2 sections of that interview, the foreign policy section, and we're going to talk about the Bernie section that he brings up as well. We're also going to discuss AOC demands. Yes, somebody is demanding something from AOC, and you're going to want to see that, especially if you caught the story where we talked about AOC's event where there were the military academies there. You're going to want to hear this. We're also going to discuss TikTok versus Meta. You see, it's not just about that hearing that happened in Congress. There's something else at play here, and I'm going to dive into that piece. And we're also going to discuss France general strike. Liberation! All right. I'm pumped. I'm excited about it. And let's get started with that story, because I think that one's the one that is the most exciting. There's a little bit of good news, at least I think so, when the people are coming together and they're deciding to disrupt power and disrupt capital. Now, a couple days ago, we did cover The recent protests in France, I told you there were two different ones. There were protests about the pension, and there were also protests against NATO. The general strike that is happening in France, some are referring to it as a national strike. Some are referring to it as a general strike, whatever. Long story short, they have decided to shut things down. And by they, I mean the workers. And President Macron is not happy about that, but there's not that much he can do. Check this out. Now, this is coming from CNN. I was actually surprised that they even talked about this. It says French airports, schools, and oil refineries hit by national strike over pension age increase. Check out the picture, guys. The trash is piling up just a block down the street from the Eiffel Tower. French transport networks, oil refineries, and schools were hit by widespread disruption Thursday as workers staged a national strike to protest an increase in the retirement age that was pushed through the parliament without a vote. If you are not aware, basically President Macron did what we would call here an executive order and decided to make that decision. Now, from what I understand, the retirement age, he's trying to raise it from 62 to 64. So adding on 2 more years there, the people in France they're not going to have it. Like, they are not kidding around. So they've been protesting for the past couple of days. And this has now led to a general strike because he actually tried to prevent people from protesting. He actually implemented a rule that prevented gatherings. That did not stop the people. The people in France are like, no, we are not going to have an increased retirement age. Through sporadic demonstrations, those sporadic demonstrations had popped up in Paris and other cities after the French government forced the bill through last week. Thursday marked the first day of coordinated action since then. It is the 9th day of strikes since the bill was introduced in January. Only 2 of the 14 metro lines in Paris were operating a normal service. The RER train services, which run in the city and its suburbs, were severely reduced, and only half of high-speed TGV trains were working. The national strike has also affected air traffic, with 30% of flights impacted at Paris Orly Airport. Unionized workers blockaded a major oil refinery in Normandy and another one in Fos-sur-Mer in the south of France, according to a government spokesperson. So I have some clips to show you because I just want you to see this in action for yourself. Now, what you have to understand is that President Macron, he actually faced a no confidence vote. Basically, what that means is it's a vote that says that if it passes, that basically the person that is holding office at that point in time is not fit to serve. He was actually able to beat that. And I think that actually made the people even more angry. And they are angry, and they have every right to be. I want to show you this clip here, which says, again, Macron survives no confidence vote, making new French pension plan law. Listen to this.
Tonight, more anger in the streets of Paris after French President Emmanuel Macron's government survived a crucial and close no-confidence vote in Parliament.
La majorité requise n'étant pas atteinte, la motion de censure n'est pas adoptée.
Making his signature pension plan, which increases the retirement age for most workers from 62 to 64, law. Reigniting the fury of protesters who have set fires and clashed with police for more than a week. Macron used what French lawmakers call the nuclear option, a constitutional maneuver allowing him to force through a bill without a full parliamentary vote. Opposition.
So yeah, like here we would refer to that as like an executive order.
Lawmakers expressing their frustration.
Depuis ce jeudi et le passage en force avec le 49.3 ne s'arrêteront pas parce que cette motion de censure a été si petitement battue à 9 petites voix. rien n'a été réglé dans le pays et le pays continue à s'enfoncer dans une crise politique que Macron a lui-même créée.
Macron was being squeezed by both a coalition of centrist and left-wing parties and also the far-right National Rally. Both debated no-confidence motions to defeat his signature pension plan and dissolve his cabinet. The new plan chipping away at a cornerstone of the French social pact and inciting the most intense political upheaval since his re-election last year. Upset protesters vowing to continue their impassioned demonstration.
We've got a president that says definitely deaf to what the French people says to him.
Earlier today, a waste.
I just wanted to say here, they have been protesting during the day, at night. This is like a 24-hour thing. This is not like a let's just go out and march for like an hour. And people need to really understand when we talk about protesting, or when I talk about protesting here in the United States, like it has to be continued. These have to like be ongoing protests. Like that's actually how those protests during the civil rights movement actually made some type of an impact. It wasn't just one march. They did these actions multiple times for years, actually. So you have to understand, like, you have to continue direct action.
Plant in a Paris suburb was brought to a standstill. Workers and union leaders pleading with the president to withdraw the plan.
Une très large majorité est contre sa régression sociale, là, cette réforme des retraites. Et il faut maintenant qu'il entende les salariés et le peuple de France. Il faut retirer ce projet.
Echoes of the Yellow Vest movement, which forced the government to repeal a contested gas tax during his first term.
So these are the Yellow Vest guys, and this is the organization I was referring to before that actually, was able to get some progressive accomplishments in France, and they do not play around.
Macron has described the cost-cutting measure as necessary for France's economy to remain competitive and aligned with its European partners. Opponents say there's no threat of bankrupting the pension system and other considerations should be made. The police have been successful in dispersing many of the demonstrations that we've seen across the city of Paris, but we've been speaking with these demonstrators. They say they will be back. They
will be back. They are not done. They are not finished. And I'm actually going to show you a clip that actually shows you that what she was saying about the police being able to stop those demonstrations. I'm going to show you a more recent clip that actually says the opposite. There's more of them than there are of the police.
Just the start of many demonstrations to come.
Yes, they are not backing down. And I want people to see this because I want people to understand, like, they do not play around, like they are serious. And there are some, I would say, American like commentators who are making the claim that basically they shouldn't complain because it's only 2 years. But see, to them, it's not just only 2 years. It's their livelihood. And what you have to understand is that in Europe, they really care about things like this and they'll fight for it. When I lived in Germany, like there was no such thing as like a 30-minute break or a 15-minute break like we have here in the United States. People would go on break for like 2 hours. Like 2 hours. There was no such thing as like you get 2 weeks of vacation a year. And some people don't even get that. They would get like months vacation. Like, so when you take something away from them that they feel is part of their livelihood, they don't play around with that. They will fight for it. Now, this whole event, this national strike that's happening in France is not just affecting those who live in France. It's also affecting those who visit France. And I'm trying not to laugh as I say this, because this clip that I'm going to show you is actually kind of funny in a sense. Now, for those who are visiting, Carol posted this on Twitter. This is what it's like landing in Paris for vacation right now. This is amazing. So here's someone who actually just came out from the airport. And I want to show you what's happening.
I landed in Paris to this. There are protesters everywhere, and there are no cars allowed in and out of the airport. My Uber driver was kind enough, and he came and picked me up, and we walked half a mile to his car, which is...
So the Uber driver, so here's the thing, guys. The Uber driver had to come and pick her up. He actually had to walk to park his car, walked to the airport to help her bring her stuff to his car, which she said was actually like a half mile away from the airport. He couldn't even come pick her up exactly like right outside the airport because of everything that's going on.
Parked on the highway along with everybody else. There's garbage everywhere in the city, and the designer stores are boarding up their windows. It's a scary scene over here, and there's cops everywhere.
Now I want to look at the garbage part again. I want to show you.
I landed in Paris to his car, which is parked on the highway along with everybody else.
Look at that. See how all the garbage is piling up? Because again, like the garbage men they're on strike. So there's no one to pick up the trash. The airports are pretty empty. The Uber drivers can't even pick people up at the airports. There's no taxi drivers apparently at the airports. This is what a general strike looks like. They shut down pretty much most of the employment at the airports. The trains have been pretty much shut down. We went over that. And then on top of that, they're not picking up the trash. And I want to say something to be very clear. When you have trash like this pile up for days, the city will start to smell. Imagine if it was summer and it was hot outside. That would be pretty gross, huh? But this is what it can happen when you realize that you, the worker, have the
There's
power.
garbage everywhere in the city, and the designer stores are boarding up their windows.
So they're already starting to board up the windows because they've already seen what has been happening and what could continue to happen. Now, I just want to give a little bit of encouragement for people here is to like, imagine if the garbage men and women, imagine if the taxi drivers, imagine if, at least here in Boston, imagine if those that work for the T, the ones who drive like the subways and the buses, all of them got together and said, you know what, we're going on strike. Then you also have the Amtrak workers go on strike. You have the port workers on the West Coast go on strike. You have the truckers go on strike. That's your general strike, guys. That's your general strike. Yeah, you can boycott Amazon. You can do those things. But a general strike is even more effective. And that's what I want people to understand. Now, I have another clip here I want to show you of the protest as well. Check this out.
French unions held more strikes against President Emmanuel Macron's reform of the country's pension system a day after he went on television to insist he won't back down. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Caroline Conan in Paris. Caroline, Macron at one point comparing this to the Capitol riots. Is that a fair comparison? Have these strikes turned violent?
When you look at what happened on Thursday in Paris, especially, in fact, the streets are definitely not calming down against this pension reform. You had more than 1 million people protesting across the country.
So they had more than 1 million people protesting. When you have those types of numbers come out, you can make an impact.
According to the police, 3.5 million people, according to the main CGT union. So quite a big crowd out there. And it was actually more violent than usual on the sidelines with those so-called black blocs, these far left groups actually clashing with the police on several occasions, especially in Paris. And you had about 150 police officers injured with some being set on fire. In fact, the turnout at these protests had gone down recently over the past few weeks, but there are since the government actually survived this vote on no confidence on Monday, the turnout yesterday.
So I wanted to pause here and I wanted to show you the turnout at the French protest. So she's saying the turnout has gone down. Look at this, guys. In January 19th, it was 1.12 million, right? Let's go all the way over to March 23rd, which was yesterday. 1.1 million. 1.1 million. And to them, like, that's the turnout has decreased. So I want you to see those numbers. Million. And to them, that's a decrease. That's low to them. Oh, it's going down. Like, just imagine, oh, the numbers are going down, but they still have over 1 million people out there protesting.
Went back up more than 1 million, as you can see on this graphic. That's because obviously the fact that the government wanted to force this reform without a vote really angered the streets.
So is there any sign that the government might react differently this time?
So, as you mentioned, the President Emmanuel Macron appeared on national television on Wednesday. He tried to appease the tension, comparing these riots to the Capitol Hill riots in Washington a couple of years ago, but saying he would stick to his pension reform, that it was in the best interest of the nation. But he came out as arrogant out of this interview. He failed to convince 70% of the French who...
Okay, this piece is important. Macron's interview on French TV, he failed to convince 70% of the people. They are not convinced that this is the way to go. So right now, he's acting against the will of the majority of the people.
Actually felt despised, who thought they didn't listen to the streets. So the strikes are likely to continue. Already you see some refineries in Normandy, near Lyon, being disrupted. Also the kerosene deliveries to some Paris airports. And in fact, we could even wonder if the visit of King Charles on Monday will go as normal, because obviously it would be a bit strange to show on national television King Charles having a state dinner in Versailles on one side and the protests and the garbage piling up in Paris on the other side. So we'll see how this goes.
So that piece there is important. I want to go ahead and get to Eric, if you can bring up the next clip. They did reference King Charles there. So apparently King Charles was actually supposed to visit Paris. That has been put on pause because of everything that's happening there. So you can imagine the king showing up there and there's just loads of garbage everywhere and him just looking at Macron and saying, like, what is this rubbish? Like, what is this? Like, what happened to your city? Like, this place is out of control. Like, what are you doing? What's going on? But it does appear he is going to continue to make his trip to Germany, just so not so much to France. And then there's questions whether or not this can actually even spread to Germany as well. And here they're going to talk a little bit about that, about King Charles' visit and why that is no longer happening, at least for now.
Good afternoon. King Charles's state visit to France this weekend has been postponed. It comes after anti-government protests in the country over plans to raise the retirement age erupted in violence again last night. The king had been due to arrive in France this Sunday. It would have been the first state visit of his reign, but it's now been cancelled at the request of the French government. Well, confirming the news, a UK government spokesperson said the King and Queen Consort's state visit to France has been postponed. This decision was taken with the consent of all parties after the President of France asked the British government to postpone the visit. A very similar statement as well from Buckingham Palace, which reads, the King and the Queen Consort's state visit to France has been postponed. Their Majesties greatly look forward to the opportunity to visit France as soon as dates can be found.
You know, it's one of those things where it's like, there are those moments when you know that, like, there may be things about your family that you only want your family to see, right? Like, everybody has like a crazy uncle or a crazy cousin or something like that, right? And it's like everyone in the family knows that, right? And you may see them get a little out of control or something like that. But you don't want other people to see that. This is what's happening right now. It's like President Macron is like, yeah, I know people here can get a little bit lit and they can get a little fiery when things don't go their way. And it's like, he knows that. And the French people know that, but he doesn't want someone else from the outside to come in and witness that. That's what this is like. We'll go on a little bit more here.
And our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, is with me. Hello there to you, Laura. This would have been the phone call that President Macron didn't want to have to make.
And it's the phone call that the king wouldn't have wanted to receive either, I think. This was a huge moment for both men, really, but particularly, I think, for the king, because it was to be his first state visit. He's visited France officially as Prince of Wales 35 times, but never as monarch. So a lot was being played into this meeting. It was seen as significant for a number of reasons, because I think if you look at where Britain is now, if you look at the amount of division, the disputes following Brexit, this meeting was seen as a reconciliation point, if you like, reaffirming the Anglo-French relationships after so much frostiness between them. That's seen as thawing away. The Windsor Framework now sort of signed and sealed. This was the two countries looking forward, we're told, a celebration of the relationship between them. But I think we'd heard very early on, we got a sense yesterday, things were going wrong.
This was the clip I really wanted you to see. You see this image? Look at all that trash. Look at it. Mm-hmm.
The word Versailles was taken out of the official information about this trip.
Seen as antagonistic to the striking.
Totally, a real provocation, the wrong place to be seen having lavish banquets. And that's where this state banquet was meant to.
She said lavish banquets. So again, the people are protesting for their own rights here. Okay. He's basically he's forcing them basically to work longer or later in life. And she goes on to say, yes, they won't be able to have their lavish banquet. Do you guys see the class divide? Oh, no, it wouldn't be good for them to have a lavish banquet with all the trash on the street and people fighting.
To be happening. So that was taken away. And then I think as the situation in France escalated, the nervousness, the twitchiness ramped up to a whole new level, culminating today with the cancellation of the French leg of this state visit.
The German leg still going
German
ahead.
Still going ahead. Have a listen now to Lord Ricketts, who's the former British ambassador to France. Interesting what he has to say.
They couldn't, for example, do the kind of walkabouts with crowds that the king enjoys so much. What was the point of doing it, really? Doing a state
Oh, boo-hoo. They can't do their walkabouts. They can't do something that the king likes to do so much.
Visit where the president himself is subject to enormous criticism, can't really appear in public in any safety. That's not a good circumstance to do a state visit in.
These are live pictures, Laura. This is President Macron. He's speaking in Brussels, unrelated to what we're talking about now. But as far as we know, that trip will not go ahead until things calm down.
Absolutely. We know that he had this phone call earlier on with the king. It is a moment of embarrassment for him, but I think they had to assess what is worse, cancelling now with just 2 days to go, or letting this trip go ahead and face a humiliation of it being.
It's a bit of an embarrassment for him because people got to see his crazy uncles and cousins. That's why he's embarrassed.
Completely overshadowed and dominated by protesters who would have really taken this moment and played it to their absolute advantage. So bad news for Macron and bad news for the king. And as I say, this is not what Buckingham Palace would have wanted. These trips are planned and planned and planned to the tiniest of details. But Germany.
But Buckingham Palace doesn't get to decide what happens in someone else's country when they go to visit. Yeah. She's like, this isn't what Buckingham Palace would have wanted, but like, it's not their country. They don't really get to decide what happens there.
Will happen. So we don't know when, and we don't know when the French trip's being postponed until, but we're assuming the Germany trip, which was meant to start on Wednesday in Berlin, will go ahead, ending in Hamburg on Friday. One thing I love about this.
There goes McDonald's.
It's the fact that this is a dispute about raising the pension age to 64. The king is 74 and still working full time. I don't.
No. Listen to what she says here. See, they're laughing about the retirement age. Listen to what they say. Let me put the captions on for this one. Listen to this.
Wednesday in Berlin will go ahead, ending in Hamburg on Friday. One thing I love about this is the fact that this is a dispute about raising the pension age to 64. The king is 74 and still working full time. I don't know if that was mentioned, but
I think he had.
The king is 74 and still working full time. Working how? What does he do? What does he do? King Charles comes from a family of inherited generational wealth and privilege. So let's not pretend that what King Charles does is anything close to what those employees working at McDonald's, the garbage men, anything close to what they do for a living. Let's remember that King Charles lives in Buckingham Palace, and that is actually the citizens' taxes that pay for his bills in Buckingham Palace. Let's all remember that. Let's all remember that the Queen at one point had a yacht that the citizens were paying for that she didn't want to part ways with. And it was finally pushed away from her, where they said, no, we're entering a new time. And the people kind of feel like it's kind of showboaty for you to have this yacht that the people are paying for. It's a bit too much. She made a big deal about it. She didn't want to let go of it. See, I know a lot about the royal family. She didn't want to let go of it. It was a boo-hoo moment for her. I've had so many wonderful times on that yacht, yes, that you did not pay for. So the fact that the commentators in this segment are sitting here and they are pretending like King Charles is just some working class Joe Schmo who's still working like he's 74, his work is not hard. His work is not taxing. His work does not affect his physical strength. Like he's not coming home from work at night with a bad back or with legs that hurt. She made it sound like he's still out here like waiting tables or something and he's 74 years old. What do they do besides steal resources and steal culture from other people's countries? Don't let me get into that. Don't let me go there. Jesus. But there's more. Because, you know, Professor Richard Wolff's family is from France. Originally, that's where they're from. And he did have something to say about what is happening right now in France in reference to capitalism. And I think everyone needs to pay close attention to this.
The conditions of modern French capitalism are such that the business community, the conservatives, the wealthy, keep pushing whoever is in power to try to get this done. And the reasoning for that is simple. They don't want to pay the taxes that are part of how this gets funded. And so to save themselves having to pay taxes, this is a small minority of the French, they want to deprive the majority of the French of the pension they've won the right to retire at age 62. So you're going to people who are already exhausted at the end of a life of working like that, and you're going to take away 2 of the few years they have in retirement? No, you're not. Here's the second argument. France has prided itself in recent decades on raising worker productivity. What a nice phrase. You know what it means? It means you get more out of a worker per hour than you used to. You've raised labor productivity. Now, you've done that in a number of ways. You have added machinery. You have improved the machinery. You now have AI. You have robotics. You have computers, all kinds of things. But you've also made workers work harder, work faster, etc. And that is wear and tear on the bodies and minds of people.
And that's exactly the point that I want to drive home when they talk about King Charles. They make it seem like he's doing work that is doing that type of, causing that type of stress to his body. He's not. Like, it's not like he's doing like this physical job.
You have made them work harder, but you haven't kept up in terms of what it means for the mental and physical capabilities. Therefore, you owe the working class some sort of adjustment to what you have pressured them to do. But you're not giving them more retirement as an offset. You're not giving them earlier retirement as an offset, which would make sense if you cared about the mass of your people. You want to take away 2 years of the retirement that they can look forward to enjoying. Don't call it a reform. You're depriving your working class of 2 years of retirement. That's what
2 years of their life. And honestly, like, I think it's ridiculous that people have to work that long. I really do. By that time, you should be able to just relax and enjoy the rest of your life. You should be having to like break your back at that age. But the thing is, the reality is, at least a lot of Americans do have to do that in this country. I know people have been working till like they're in their 80s. Like, it's ridiculous. But the French they are not trying to put up with this. And mainstream media, they don't really want to talk about this. And when they do, they want to make it seem like the protesters are being ridiculous because they don't want Americans to start to get ideas.
You're asking for. Take away 2 years of whatever you can enjoy in the way of a retired life. But I stress these are arguments. In France, the unions long ago learned a lesson not all that well learned in many other countries. Yep. That the arguments are never what win the case. They're important, they're worth developing, they're worth publicizing, and the French are doing all of that. But you've got to get the bodies out on the street. And that's why the unions declared, all 7 or 8 of the different federations of unions in France, agreed together, cooperating, to have a general strike.
And see, this is the part that is very important. That is very key, I think. You have different sectors of the workforce coming together and saying, let's all go on strike at the same time. And that's how you create a general strike. And those things can be very much effective. The problem is that we seem to have here in the United States is that a lot of people here are out for their self. They only want to look out for their union, or they only want to look out for their union supervisor or their sector of the workforce. And they don't really care what's happening across the street when those workers may be dealing with the same issues. They're not thinking that way. And that is why something like Workers Strike Back, which Shama Sawant and Socialist Alternative have started, is very, very important, because they realize that when Chris Smalls helped the Amazon workers at the warehouse go on strike, they realized that, you know what? They need some help. They realized that all of these different companies where these employees were going on strike like a year and a half ago, they realized it would be even more effective if they all came together. And that's why you have something like that has been created. And one of their first goals is to organize Amazon warehouses across the United States. This is not something that Chris Smalls can do by himself. He needs some help. So you have to educate. And then Americans really have to deprogram our minds. We really have to get out of this mindset that is just about what we want, what we need, and ignoring our neighbors' needs. We very much have like this individual mindset in this country. It's all about me, 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 instead of we. And if we start thinking more in reference to we instead of me, I think we can get a lot more done.
A general strike. They've been planning it for weeks, scheduled for the 7th of March. That strike is underway already because different unions start at different points. And so it's sort of a stretched out event, because you're talking about millions of people.
Yep.
It will be not at all surprising if there's more than 1 million on any given day not working, staying at home, and or in the streets. But the unions in France know that to win this fight, they need to be allied. They have to have allies. And the allies are 2 things in France that are worth our looking at and understanding. First, they ally with social movements against racism, movements against the persecution of immigrants.
This is why when people ask about the demands that Shama Sawant has for Workers' Strike Back, this is why one of the demands is against racism and oppression, because she obviously paid attention to what the Yellow Vest did and the other unions have done in places like France. They came together on the worker issues, and then they decided to come together on actual social movements as well. So now you're a double threat. Let's go on.
Movements, you fill in the blank. The unions work with them. They go out and support them in exchange for them supporting the unions. And since everyone has an interest, everyone in the working class, the vast majority of France, has an interest in holding on to the pensions they fought for and won, this is an alliance that can be built. A bit more interesting in the French context is the fact there's a third player in this alliance: the unions, the social movements, and the left-wing political parties.
And that's the piece that we are missing here in the United States. So when people ask us, why do you guys get so upset with people like AOC and Cori Bush and the rest of them? Because they are the missing piece. If we don't have those politicians who said they would fight for those issues, who some of them did fight for those issues before they became politicians, if we don't have that voice, that fighter in DC, that actually can hurt the movement. Now, that's not to say that we still can't make it happen. We can make it happen, but it's even more powerful and meaningful when you have people in Congress that have your back with your movement on the outside. France does this. The UK does this. Germany does this. This is the difference, people. I talked to Claire Daly about this not too long ago when she said that's the difference. The politicians that they have, the left wing politicians that they have in the EU that represent them, they are there and down for the fight for the social movements and the worker movements. So they have someone that has that power and that voice to represent them in the political space while they do the work outside the political space. But then that politician is also helping them on the outside as well. This is very crucial for people to understand. You are now a triple threat.
That's right. The unified left-wing political parties who contested in the race and whose candidate, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, came a couple of percentage points behind Mr. Macron. That's all. Not a big difference. They have also mobilized to support and participate in this general strike. It's a little bit like the next phase of what was called the Yellow Vest movement a couple of years ago.
And that's the Yellow Vest right behind him. If you guys are wondering what this is, that's one of the Yellow Vests. Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, Solidarité. That's the Yellow Vest.
Movement of enormous power and strength, which overturned initiatives by Mr. Macron and only came to an end because of COVID and all that it implied for people getting together and marching down the street.
Yep.
So all of these forces are getting together. And unlike Annalena Baerbock in Germany, the Greens in France are participating in all of this.
Oh, that was kind of a woo. That was kind of a low blow. Because the Green Party in Germany has completely caved. They've completely caved. So he even have the Green Party participating as well. If you want to see this full video, the name of this video is called A General Strike in France: 4 Challenges to Capitalism with Richard Wolff. Please watch the rest of this video, you guys. I think this is very important, very crucial for people to understand that this is how they're doing it. This is actually how they are able to have that general strike. Eric, if you have a moment, if you can put that link for people in the chat so they can see the rest of that video. Four pieces. Now we have some of them, but not all of them. I'm gonna go to some of the comments in the chat and we'll go to our next story. SG says more than 10 million marched for George Floyd. This is true. Apollo Creed's young nephew. Y'all remember when Macron got slapped a couple of years ago? They do not F around over there. I remember that. Oh, God. I should have tried to find that video. I might try to find that video. That one was funny. The Oracle says all this capitalist extraction and exploitation without regards to the labor that makes it all possible. 100%. Thank you for the super chat. Larez, strikes in 30s made FDR pass Social Security. Strikes needed again. Yes. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. I'm so impressed of how the French people have more class and solidarity activity than other democracies in the West. Hey, Americans, it's about class. That's right. See how they can all come together over the economic issues? I'll take the comments on Rockfin. All righty. Thank you so much for the comment on Rockfin Dave. Every single mainstream report I've seen in media available in US stream/TV have made fun of or put down the protests and not covered them at all fully or honestly. Yep. They're just making the protesters look like crazy people. That's what they're doing. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin Roger. American commentators that say it's only 2 years, fine, then make the retirement age 63. In the waning days of when Bobby was set to leave New Edition, he was not putting up with wearing sweaters, looking yuppie and bubblegum. The rest of the group said, come on, Bobby, just wear it already. Bobby was not having it. He was like, we street dudes from Roxbury, Boston. France is Bobby. We in the US are other members of the group. Okay, he's talking about the R&B group New Edition. So he's saying that those of us in the US, you guys, we're the rest of New Edition, and France is Bobby Brown. So France decided, to go on their own. That's what that's about. Okay, I want to get into this story here about AOC demands, because I don't know if you've heard about this, but this was sent to me recently. So we all know about the event that happened with AOC, where there were military academies that were there. AOC issued a response to that. I covered that a couple of days ago. And she basically tried to fault the protesters. She told lies about the protesters, saying that they weren't even from the Bronx. And that apparently was not true. She told lies about the protesters and said that they attack women and people of color. It just bogus, just identity politics BS, so that she doesn't have to take responsibility for her own actions. Now, they have responded to her and they're asking for a list of demands. So I told them I would mention this on the show. I'm actually going to start with the discussion that I had. I was brought on to Rising recently to talk about just that. So I have a clip here I'm going to share, rebuting some of the things that AOC said in her response, which I thought was ridiculous. I went on to say in that video that in order to get into an academy like West Point, you need to receive a nomination from a congressman or a congresswoman / politician. That's actually incorrect. I actually know multiple people that have attended West Point. I'm from a military family. I'm very familiar with how these military academies work. And what she leaves out is the fact that a lot of people attend West Point because they have a nomination from their ROTC unit from high school. You do not need a nomination from a congressperson in order to attend West Point. That was just an excuse for her to explain why she needed to be there. I also want to add to people, it's important that you understand, she goes on to explain that these are academies, they're getting college education, but the idea that when you join these military academies is that you are going to go into the military afterwards. When you sign up to join West Point, you are joining the Army. So I just want to chime in here because some people tried to give me pushback on this. Of course, these people had no experience dealing with the military or these academies. So that was really interesting to me. I want to be very clear here. When you go to West Point, and I say that because that is the school that AOC referenced in her response bid. When you go to West Point, you are joining the Army, not the Navy, not the Coast Guard, not the Marines. West Point is specifically Army. And it was really funny to me, the number of people who had no experience in this field whatsoever try to tell me what these schools were about. And so I went on to the web pages of these schools, which they could have easily done so themselves, sent them screenshots of the requirements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because my experience wasn't enough. I had to go onto the websites to actually show them the proof. And these are people on social media. They're ridiculous. But I want to be very clear about that. That is what you do. People were saying, well, you do need that letter to join the Air Force Academy. I know that for a fact. Quickly went onto the Air Force Academy's webpage. Nope. And sent them other requirements. This is what happens when people honestly is just like, let me jump in and try to defend AOC. I want AOC to be right so badly. Let me try to come back and smear this black woman and tell her she doesn't know what she's talking about. That was some of the things that people said to me. Seriously. Ridiculous. So AOC is now willing to have this conversation with someone who's very familiar with the process, who knows a lot about the military. She wants to get on Instagram instead of posting that video on Twitter, which is where she received a lot of the criticism. And I also thought it was interesting that she goes on to say in that video that the people who are criticizing her are typically people who come after women and people of color. Well, I'm a black woman, so she can miss me with all of that. Okay, so that was part of the clip from Rising, and I wanted to make sure that I showed that because this is something every time AOC is attacked, she used the same excuse. Every time it's because she's a woman, it's because she's a woman of color, the people don't live there, or the people are right wing. And these are people, a lot of these people are her own constituents that she's smearing. A lot of these people are her own constituents. So the thing is this, she hosted this event for people who were defending AOC saying she did not host it. If you look at the flyer, it actually says hosted by AOC and Adriano. So it was really interesting to me. All the receipts were right there. But I noticed how quickly people wanted to come and defend AOC. She's a lost cause at this point. Now, the protesters were not happy about the way that she treated them. They were not happy with the lies that she told. And some of those protesters who were a part of the Bronx Green Party, so this is a chapter of the National Green Party, the Bronx Green Party, they actually issued a response yesterday. And I want to show you that response. So it says the AOC Espelot military drive. This was issued yesterday. Let's go on. See, here's the picture here of some of the protesters, right? Richie, by the way, Richie works in the Bronx. He teaches at a school in the Bronx. But according to AOC, they're outsiders. Let's go on. Correcting the misrepresentation of Ocasio-Cortez and Common Sense Bronx demands. On March 20th, 2023, Representatives AOC and Adriano Espelot hosted a student services fair featuring special guests such as the U.S. Naval Academy, the Air Force, Merchant Marines, and Coast Guard. The event was held at Renaissance High School, where minority enrollment is around 94%, and 83% of students are economically disadvantaged. Given the U.S. military track record of recruiting children and young adults from such categories, many Bronx leftists mobilized to attend. Notice here it says Bronx leftists, but according to AOC, they're right wing. Let's go on. For more on the protest, please see direct video via the YouTube channel Blue Moon Red Wine and firsthand TikTok commentary by protest participant and former AOC campaign worker BX Pro here. So they sent the links. And again, this one, which I think I showed this video to you guys, BX Pro, that was someone who worked on AOC's campaign. But these are right-wing people, according to AOC. Our goal: to ensure military recruiters did not mislead teens during presentations and militaries, and to provide students with a realistic look at what military service entails and what alternatives exist. Most of us are Bronx residents. More than one of us worked with AOC on her 2018 campaign and or even hosted her at our homes. And some of them were also Queens residents because Adriano represents Queens. Our ranks also include the brother of Bronx soldier Private Abdul Latifu, who was murdered at Fort Rucker this year. That loss, along with the deaths of two young female Latina soldiers, Private Vanessa Guillen and Ana Basaldua Ruiz, are examples of exactly what we wish to warn students of at that event. For those who are not aware, those two women that are mentioned here, those were the two women that were sexually assaulted and they reported it and they were killed. They were in the military. Per the school's registration form, the event was open to anyone interested in learning about the different resources and opportunities available to students. Arriving, we found a large military and NYPD presence at the entrance. Most adults without a child were stopped at the door, including a few parents we met in line. Although we had registered and provided photo ID, we and those parents were told our names were not on the list and turned away. And why do you guys think that is? Why do you guys think that is? Could it be possible that AOC probably had already told them that she had been confronted by protesters, and so anyone who was not an actual student at the school, they didn't really want at those events so that she wouldn't be confronted again? Could that be possible? How is it they were allowed to register for the event, but they weren't allowed to actually attend the event? Let's go on. The one member of our group who was allowed to briefly enter reported there were many militaries in the school. You see this? Many. I played this video. I shared this video on Twitter. Many militaries in the school. Later, a retired colonel came out to our group and argued the military was a benefit to impoverished youth, which surely echoed the message delivered inside. I played that video on here as well. Meanwhile, all unattended teens were welcomed and waved in. All unattended teens were welcomed and waved in. You see what's happening? Since we, the public, were barred from witnessing the presentations, our group stood outside in the cold to hear from veterans, soldiers' families, and other longtime activists. Representatives AOC and Adriano Espaillat snuck in the side entrance. At no point did they acknowledge our presence. In a subsequent Instagram post, AOC claimed to be targeted as a woman of color. Ironically, at the very time, our group, largely consisting of POC and women, raised our voices to protect marginalized teens from exploitative military recruitment. And this was another thing that I had mentioned to people. You have to understand, most of those protesters were people of color like AOC or women like AOC. Let's go on. In her video, AOC went on to caution about safety issues for children. Given the event included admission to military institutions such as West Point and Annapolis, none of which had to be there. Safe alternatives for youth are what we are calling for. Not as random adults, but as people who live, love, and raise families in the Bronx. Despite AOC's assertions, none of what we relay here is rumor, right-wing, false, vile rhetoric, misinformation, disingenuous, or attacks. all variants on the Trumpian deflection of fake news and alternative facts. We write this as firsthand participants and witnesses, which is what grassroots activism is about. Not because an algorithm tickled our anger centers, but because we here in the Bronx know the economic exploitation our teens face, even if some elected officials have conveniently forgotten. That's her. What grassroots activism also requires is political accountability and transparency. In that spirit, we formally issue the following 3 preliminary demands to Representative AOC. 1, that she and the school provide unedited videos of both her and Representative Aspalat's speeches at the event, and that all of the protesters as well, the presenters as well. If what was said inside was so beneficial to our community, surely she would want other teens to hear those words as well. 2, the Renaissance High School, with the life-changing, full endorsement and equal amplification from AOC, agreed to host a follow-up anti-military presentation featuring educational groups such as We Are Not Your Soldiers and Veterans for Peace. When it comes to life and life-changing decisions, doesn't AOC want Bronx teens to be afforded such balanced information and viewpoints? That's a good question. And 3, that Representative AOC apologize to our group and all who have supported her up until now for her libelous misrepresentation of longtime Bronx residents who still understand, even if she does not, that raising a ruckus is vital when faced with institutional power behind closed doors. So they're demanding 3 things. In short, 1, they want the school to provide unedited videos of the speeches at the event. 2, they want the school to host an anti-military presentation with groups like We Are Not Your Soldiers and Veterans for Peace. And 3, they want AOC to issue an apology. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think those demands are unreasonable at all. Doesn't take much to apologize. Doesn't take much for those schools to host an event with like Veterans for Peace. They could get those military schools together. They could get Veterans for Peace together. And 3, it doesn't take much for them to send them the unedited footage of that event. Someone recorded it somewhere. Someone recorded it somewhere. And if you were inside that event and you were able to record any of those speeches, reach out to them. Reach out to them or reach out to me. Let us know. That's right. Desert Mantis, those are very reasonable demands. 100%. So they're not happy. And I don't blame them. And I knew it. I said, I know this woman is not lying on them in this video. If you have more information, please reach out to them. The Bronx Screens. You can email them at bxantiwar@gmail.com. Eric, if you get a chance, can you put that in the chat? That's bxantiwar@gmail.com. And I'll be sure to share these demands elsewhere as well. Because this is, look, here's the see, I told you, look at the protesters. See? See? Most of them are people of color or women. And AOC should really be ashamed of herself. She really should. There's Jose. Jose also lives in the Bronx. Oh, look, there's a woman. Not women. In NATO. And then they also put the link to that Democracy Now video. And it looks like they put the link to my clip saying they attack women. So there's the clip from the live stream that I did. But yeah, please reach out to them if you have more information. Because that's not cool, man. That's not cool. Not cool at all. She's become a typical politician. She's gotten to the point where she can just lie on her constituents like that. And Adriano's constituents. But the reason why people aren't going after Adriano is because Adriano didn't make the statement that AOC did in 2020. He didn't say that the military, they shouldn't be at the, they shouldn't come to those high schools. She did. All right. Let me go to some of these comments here. The Oracle says if AOC had an ounce of integrity, she would have been more circumspect about a high school appearance to ensure there were no conflicts. Rondo says, I don't understand why military recruitment of children is not seen as a crime against that child. And thank you for the super chat, Roger. Oh, yes. Colonel Sanders unleashing his WMD gaslight on us. There you go. I think there's a comment there. Shout out to Delthea, who's been a Sabby member for 19 months. Delthea said the poverty draft is real, and the fact that powers that be are acknowledging that fact in public means they have no problem with the poverty draft. There you go. Go ahead and smash that like button, guys. If you haven't had a chance to do so, we'll do a quick like check. Actually, I don't like check, but CJ like checks. But I'm telling you, go ahead and hit the like button if you hadn't had a chance to do so. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin Roger. I had a young customer some time ago who told me that he went to West Point and he said that Hakeem Jeffries had sponsored him. So that led me to believe that you have to be sponsored by a congressperson to go there. But apparently that's not mandatory. It just helps. Thanks for clearing that up, Sabrina. Yeah, it's not. Like everyone I know that went to West Point that actually got in, none of them was sponsored, or not really sponsored, nominated. None of them was nominated by a congressperson. Not one. So that's that. I'm sure that probably would make you look even better application-wise, but sometimes you never know what they're thinking. I mean, I had another classmate who only applied to West Point, didn't have backup schools. You're supposed to have backup school. He didn't have a backup school, straight A student, ROTC all throughout high school, and he was rejected from West Point. You never know what they're thinking, but yet I know people that didn't have straight A's and, weren't in ROTC the entire time through high school, but they did get in. So sometimes you never know. Ryan said AOC Academy. Oh dear. Oh dear. Okay. We're going to go ahead and move on to this interview with Glenn Greenwald and Marianne Williamson, and we're going to focus on the foreign policy aspect, and maybe if time permits, a little bit of the Bernie aspect, because he touches on both of those things. I think that either Marianne may have been listening, to what has been said about her views on foreign policy. Maybe someone has spoken to her. I did notice her responses here seem a little bit different, but at the same time, like there are certain parts where I was like, so what is she really saying? Let's go ahead and get started with it. But here we go. Let me see if I can, this is on Rumble. So toggle full screen. Is that what I'm supposed to do? Okay, here we go.
In 1968, which is undoubtedly one of the most fascinating and in some sense tragic years in American history. And it is interesting because it wasn't just that there was a primary, it actually forced Lyndon Johnson to announce he wouldn't seek re-election, in part because the success of Eugene McCarthy and Bobby Kennedy, until he was murdered, made it clear he was likely to face a lot of headwind, largely over the Vietnam War. And that same year, Martin Luther King gave what was one of his last and greatest speeches, where he kind of said, For a long time, I focused on my attention on domestic issues and racial issues, and I now realize those issues are inextricably linked to questions of foreign policy. What the United States does overseas in its various wars is a big reason why we have so much inequality here at home, and they cannot be extricated. I don't want to suggest there's a equivalency between the war in Vietnam and the war in Ukraine. Obviously, there's enormous differences. At the same time, Joe Biden himself says because of the war in Ukraine, we're closer now to nuclear Armageddon than at any time since 1962 because we're facing a proxy war with the nuclear armed power. The last time people were asked to vote on that was in May when the Biden administration requested $40 billion on top of the $15 billion that had already been authorized. Every Democrat, every single one of them in unity voted yes. It was 6 or 7 dozen Republicans who voted no. Most Republicans voted yes as well. How would you have voted on that authorization for $40 billion on top of the $15 billion back in May to fuel the proxy war in Ukraine?
Okay, just to be clear, he's asking her how would she have voted on the funding to Ukraine, going back to that $40 billion. That was, I think, was the biggest package at that point in time. So that's the question. How would she have voted? That's it. That's it. Let's go on.
I think if you're going to be an anti-imperialist, you have to be an anti-imperialist, whether it's an American or a Russian. And even though I don't think that the United States has had clean hands here regarding our relationship to NATO, regarding the Aegis missiles in Poland, I don't think any of that was a justification for this brutal dictator to make the invasion that he did. So I.
I'm sorry. Eric said Sabby has to translate Glenn's question. I just like to repeat it for people, people are kind of like, okay, just so we know what she's supposed to answer here. Now, this is where I say, I think that someone either has spoken to her or maybe she's kind of taken to heart what people have been saying about her views about foreign policy. And when we come to like Russia, Ukraine, that was a big one. And Israel and Palestine is also a big issue. So I noticed this time around, she's saying that she realizes that the U.S. is not innocent here. They're not clean. They don't have clean hands. She realizes that it sounds like she realizes that NATO is also problematic. And this is different from what I've heard her say before. And so that's why I said, I think that someone may have spoken to her, or either she's been listening to what people have been saying about her stances in reference to foreign policy, particularly with this war with Russia and Ukraine. But I do want to just remind you one more time, the question that Glenn had is, how would you have voted for that $40 billion package to send that money to Ukraine? Let's bring it back to that point and let's continue.
Have felt that any withdrawal of support until very recently would be simply to say that it's okay for there to be no more Ukraine. And that would be intolerable to me. But we have known, General Milley has said it, the RAND Corporation has said it, this is going to be a negotiated settlement. And I think we have a moment here where something might be happening. Xi talking to Putin, presenting some principles of possibility for a negotiated settlement. We'll see what Zelensky does and what Zelensky says about that. And I think the United States should do everything possible to support that negotiated settlement and a diplomatic solution.
But the question was not what the United States should have done, but how would you have voted for that package? That was the question. Would you have voted for it or would you have voted against it? Now, you notice earlier on, she said like it would have been a mistake to completely withdraw support. But that wasn't the question, though. The question was about that $40 billion package. This is why I kept repeating to you Glenn's question, because if you think about it, she really didn't answer the question.
So the posture of the United States government is expressed by John Kirby, the former Pentagon spokesman who now works in the White House, and other U.S. officials when asked about the potential for a ceasefire and diplomatic relations or diplomatic attempts to resolve the war has been, we're totally opposed to any ceasefire. We think that it would allow the Russians time to rebuild. Do you agree with that? Do you think that the United States and other NATO countries should continue to oppose a ceasefire and fuel the war? Or would you be in favor of kind of a Chinese attempt, along with the Russians and Ukrainians, to forge a ceasefire in the hope of getting a resolution to the war?
It shouldn't be John Kirby's decision. It shouldn't be the U.S. State Department's decision. I think we need to hear what Zelensky himself has to say. Zelensky has said that he is open, that he's interested. He wants to hear what the Chinese have to say. We know that Xi talked to Putin, but there hasn't been any report that he's talked yet, even virtually, to Zelensky. So, no, the United States should not be making that decision. The United States should be doing everything to support any possibility that's occurring here of a negotiated settlement in Ukraine.
So,
see, that's very different than what she said before. You know, when she came on RBN, this is different than what she said before. So that's what I'm saying. Like, now she's saying that there should be some type of negotiation. Let's go on. Because you know Glenn's going to ask a follow-up to that.
Just to be clear in that, so many of Zelensky's statements, especially over the last 4 or 5 months, have become almost, I would say, more kind of maximalist, that he has no interest in ending that war until not only is Russia expelled from every inch of Ukrainian territory, but Crimea is wrenched out of the hands of the Russians as well. And he is willing to fight for not only months, but years, if necessary, in order to accomplish those war goals. So if the position of Zelensky is, we don't want to stop this war until every one of our objectives is achieved, including expelling Russia from Crimea, would that mean you would continue to just open the Treasury of the United States and continue to pour unlimited sums of money for as long as Zelensky demands it?
The way that Glenn asked these questions, who was it? Salma said Greenwald is a masterful interviewer. Listen, the way that Glenn asked these questions, this lets you know he's asking these questions in a way to make sure you're really paying attention to what he's asking you, because he's laying it all out there. And this is why I was repeating the question, because I want people to understand this is what he's actually asking you. So let's see what Marianne says here.
Well, first of all, Zelensky's comments the other day are different than the ones that you just described. So first of all, let's hear what Zelensky has to say now. And number two, no, you don't just open up the Treasury. I would never support any kind of like a blank check for this. We should be taking whatever actions will help a negotiated settlement, but I'd like it to be a negotiated settlement that does allow Ukraine to exist as a country. And there have
See, this is different. That's different than what she said on Status Quo, and that's different than what she said on RBN. Because now she's saying she does not support like the blank check idea.
Been in times when such a suggestion would not have.
No, I get that, but I mean, what are the limits that you would impose on the U.S.'s support for Ukraine?
I think we should be open to what.
So that's Glenn asking. So what he's doing is he's asking that question again because he didn't get the answer to what he was trying to ask. Like, are there any limits that you would impose? And if so, what would those limits be?
So I think that we should be open to any moment when there might be the possibility of a negotiated settlement that would allow for the existence of Ukraine. And I think, and like I said, we might be on the verge of such a moment. That's why what's happening now with China is interesting. We live in a multipolar world now. This is not about the United States just dictating what we want all the time. There are other powers. And it's like when Macron tried to make some kind of a negotiation happen, try to broker some kind of a deal. And I'm not naive about the Chinese Communist Party, but if they have some ideas on the table here that could maybe bring a negotiated settlement closer between Zelensky and Putin, then I think the United States should say, hey, let's hear what it is and let's do what we can to support that.
But notice she didn't answer the question about the money. Because see, this is what was that Tory said? The Tory said, Marianne is taking her cue from Bernie Sanders, LMFA. Well, notice she didn't answer the monetary question. Like, she didn't answer the question like, would she continue to blank check? Would she have voted for that $40 billion? When it comes to the money piece, she's not actually answering that part of the question. That's why Glenn kind of reframed it and asked the question again.
So speaking of China and the Chinese Communist Party, there was a big hearing held today in the House of Representatives. I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but it was about the Biden administration's announcement that it is essentially ready to demand that TikTok either sell itself to an American company or to business interests that the United States government trusts more than its current ownership, or just be banned outright in the United States. Is that a proposal that you support?
You know, I take surveillance seriously. I take surveillance seriously, stealing data seriously, whether it's Facebook or the Chinese. I do think it's a serious issue. The idea that your data is going right into the data system of the Chinese Communist Party. That's not like nothing. But at the same time, it's also, I wish that we saw that same kind of interest in what's going on with Facebook and every other country here in the United States, which should be regulated. So the fact that the conversation is on the table is not illegitimate. But let's see where it goes and what happens. I see both sides of that argument to some extent, but no, I don't think we should get rid of TikTok. I myself am as a candidate. I mean, TikTok is I thought TikTok, had its value before, and I certainly see its value now. And I think.
Thank you so much for saying this, Nolan. Communist Party of China, not Chinese Communist Party. Thank you for saying that. A lot of people have been framing it that way, though, Nolan. A lot of people have been saying, or in media have been saying communist, the Chinese Communist Party. I have heard them saying that, but thank you for that clarification there.
To some people, particularly the younger generation, we don't have to rush to an answer on every single issue the moment something occurs.
But the question, so see, this is kind of, again, I feel like she's not answering the question, because he's asking, like, would you support that, a ban on TikTok in the United States? And she goes on to say, like, what she likes about TikTok, and she goes on to say, like, her concerns about, I've told you guys this before, but the whole China thing, a lot of it with the U.S. government is just totally economic, because they realize China is an economic threat to U.S. power. And then two, the other thing is the whole communism factor, which, by the way, we actually do not have a true communist country in the world. We really don't, but it is what it is. Anyway, it's just like when she comes in and she says that we don't have to have an answer, but he's asking you. It's like, but he's asking you, do you support it? What would you do? So to come back and say, we don't have to have an answer for everything. If you are president of the United States, you're going to have answers, especially when it comes to foreign policy, when you may not want to. That's the thing about being president. And this is the thing I told you before about the foreign policy. That's a big one for me, because that is an area where the president can act alone and doesn't necessarily need the approval of Congress to do so. Obama has done this. So the thing is that if you are president of the United States, you're going to have to say something better than that. That's the promise. Or the problem, the promise.
It's okay to process something. And the larger question about surveillance and data mining is not something that we should avoid.
What about
the surveillance thing? I think in reference to like the TikTok, I really do feel like this is being blown out of proportion, not necessarily by Marianne, but just in general. We're going to get to the TikTok segment after this story. I do feel like, the way that they were focused on the creator of TikTok yesterday in those hearings, I'm like, some of the questions they were asking him, they need to ask Mark Zuckerberg. They need to ask Google. They need to ask any of these apps that are on your phone. They can all do the same thing. And just because an app was created outside of the US, all of a sudden they see it as a threat. But like I said before, this is more about their economic fear that they have with a country like China, because economically China is doing pretty well, especially when you look at the banking industry. They have most of the banks in the top 10. We do not. That was not always the case. And I say this because if you look at an app like Spotify was not made in America. Spotify is a Sweden app, but you don't see them grilling Spotify. They can also use our data. But let's go on.
The U.S.-Chinese relationship, just more generally, Do you see the Chinese as a kind of competitor of American hegemony? Do you see them as something greater than that, say like an adversary, or do you see them as an enemy of the United States?
I want to stay away from any language like enemy of the United States. I want to stay away from anything even like adversary. We are a competitor, and we have and we have a lot of economic interrelationship right now, and we should continue to be competitors, and we should be looking down the road and hoping for the day when cooperation and collaboration on such things as climate change will be the normalized position. In the meantime, we have some real differences with the Chinese Communist Party, and we should not pretend that those don't exist either. But we don't need a Cold War with China. We don't need saber rattling. That's not where we should be. We should be careful. We should try to remain competitors, yes, in a healthy way, hopefully for that day where it is healthy competition. And in the meantime, we're not naive either about the Chinese Communist Party.
I wish people would stop referring to it as that. Don says, if China was spying on us, wouldn't there be evidence in the coding? That's a good point, Don. Yeah, I know not everyone, people keep saying the Chinese Communist Party. And the thing is, like, why can't you just say China? Because I feel like when people do say that, and this is not just a Marianne thing, I've seen a lot of people do this in mainstream media. They keep saying that as if they're trying to use that word communism to make the American people more afraid of China. I feel like that's really why they do that. Instead of just saying China, it just, I don't know, but let's go on.
So one of the tactics of the TikTok CEO when testifying for 6 hours in the face of very hostile bipartisan questioning was to try and claim, I think often validly, that many of the concerns that were raised about TikTok, and you suggested this yourself in a prior answer, were also true of Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Google for sure, namely questions of how we're being tracked and how that data is being weaponized and how it's being sold. Another big concern about big tech recently from the Twitter files, but also other reporting, has been the attempts by the United States government through agencies like the CIA, the FBI, Homeland Security, to influence content moderation or censorship decisions by big tech. There's two sides of that argument. One is those agencies have no role whatsoever to play in how those private companies make those decisions. The other is, no, actually a lot of the content on big tech is a threat to the United States, and we want those agencies that are designed to protect us telling these companies what they regard as potentially dangerous, potentially harmful to American citizens. What is your view on sort of the Twitter files and the revelations of them and the proper role between the U.S. security state on the one hand and big tech on the other?
Well, I don't want the Chinese Communist Party messing with me, but I don't want the CIA messing with me either.
Do you guys see what I'm saying about I don't like it. I don't like the repetition of the Chinese comedy. I don't like that. It just I don't know. Like, I feel like it's. I'll come back. Come back to me.
So the idea that the CIA is going to protect me by anything it's doing at Facebook does not necessarily make me feel safer or happier. At the same time, if there is any regulation to be had regarding protection of privacy, it's much easier for the U.S. if it's an American company. So I don't want anyone collecting my data, but I don't see the CIA as the great protector of all things private.
Right, but
so Glenn's going to come up with a follow-up because, again, it's like, Eric, you hit it right on the head. This is what I was leaning towards. Yeah, that's how I feel. Like, that's what it is. Saying CCP is red baiting. It give me like it's like a dog whistle feeling. Like, I don't like it. I don't like it when people keep saying that. Like, it just rubs me the wrong way. But Glenn's going to come up with a follow-up here. Stephanie, you're right, Sabby. She's China baiting. I don't like it. I don't like the whole, like, the stop. No. All right. He's coming with a follow-up here to that question because Glenn, again, I guess he feels like he didn't get a solid, I guess, answer, so to speak.
But based on things you've seen, do you think that is a real concern, namely that the FBI, the CIA, Homeland Security sees the internet as a tool, not for necessarily propagandizing other countries, which arguably is within the scope of its mission, but propagandizing Americans as well and interfering in our politics. Do you think that is a problem that they've been doing that? Do you believe that's something they've been doing?
I think it is legitimate to suggest it. I think that it is part of good citizenship to be constantly holding to a reasonable and appropriate skepticism about overreach by anybody. Now,
but here's the part here. So I'm not sure if Marianne has looked at the Twitter files, but even just if you haven't looked at the Twitter files, let's go off of like history and evidence that's come out recently. When she says she thinks that it's legitimate to suggest it, nah, like it's been proven though. Like it's been proven with Fred Hampton. It was proven with MLK. It was proven recently with Malcolm X. Actually, his family is suing the FBI and the NYPD and the CIA. They're suing 3 agencies that basically killed Malcolm X. So there have been, when we look at even just the revolutionary leaders, it has been confirmed that they were killed by those government agencies. So to say that it's legitimate to suggest it, it's already been proven. So this is the piece. I think that's why Glenn probably did a follow-up there, because let's say you haven't seen the Twitter files, and that's fine. It is what it is. Also, everybody's not on Twitter. It is what it is. But based on the information that has come out over the past couple of years, it has been confirmed that they have killed revolutionary leaders. I don't know if Marianne is aware of that, or maybe she is aware, but she just didn't feel comfortable saying it. And so she says, I think it's legitimate to suggest it. But no, you have to be very clear about this here. It is not a suggestion. It has been confirmed. So I think if I was her, I would look into that. Look into those cases.
Not only by the corporations, but also by the government. It's both. Neither one of them should be getting in our business in places where they should need to stay the hell out. And that applies to Facebook, and it applies to the CIA.
All right, let me ask you one more question about foreign policy before we just kind of shift right into domestic policy, which is, for a long time, on the kind of progressive wing of the Democratic Party, one of the major foreign policy debates was the question of the relationship between the Israeli and the Palestinians. The issue has taken on a little bit more attention in light of the foreign aid that the United States gives to Israel. Obama signed a record-setting deal with Netanyahu for billions of dollars a year that the United States transfers to Israel every year. The Israeli government is undergoing a lot of changes in terms of its ideological makeup. There are people inside the government who just explicitly say, we do not believe in a two-state solution. We believe all of the West Bank belongs to Israel. Would you, as an American president, continue to unconditionally provide that aid to Israel, or would you demand changes in Israeli behavior before getting that aid? And if so, what changes would you require?
Would you demand that aid? So the aid that's going to Israel.
Well, first of all, that $3.8 billion through 2008 is already codified into law. But we can use the fact that that is codified into law to exert leverage. There is behavior on the part of the Israeli government, particularly now, particularly with this extreme right-wing swing that they're taking. The United States absolutely has the right to say, if you're going to take any money, which, as I said, is codified into law through 2028, this money absolutely cannot be used in any way that transgresses against the democratic values upon which we purport to stand. We don't always do that perfectly here. I don't think any conscious person thinks that we do, but it must be our ideal. And it must be our ideal not only in the way we behave here, but in behavior that we support, particularly with our money and our financial leverage in other countries. The United States absolutely has the right to make certain demands about how that money is used. Absolutely.
Yeah, so for a long time, the argument of supporters of Israel in the West was, we're trying to facilitate a two-state solution, that the Palestinians should have their own.
Here comes the two-state part.
Sovereign state side by side with the Israeli state. If you ask almost anybody in that region at this point, people regard that as a virtual impossibility, largely due to just how many incursions there have been into the West Bank by what the UN and the international community regard as illegal settlements that would be almost require a civil war within Israel to actually remove. Do you still consider the two-state solution a viable solution? And if not, what do you see as what the United States should be pushing for there?
Do you still consider the two-state solution to be a viable solution? And if not, what should the U.S. be pushing for there to happen?
Unfortunately, I have come to realize that it's more dead than I had hoped. I had felt that the two-state solution was dead, but I believe in resurrection, you know? We are living at a time, though, when it is becoming less and less reasonable to even bring it to the table. I believe that the United States should be giving robust and equal support to both security and the human rights of both the Israelis and the Palestinians. And as you were talking about the possibility of something as horrifying as civil war there, 250,000 people were protesting on the streets of Tel Aviv recently. The efforts of the Netanyahu government to basically get rid of their Supreme Court. So the Israelis, I think, have come to a point where some changes are going to have to be made. So decisions are going to have to be made. I think not only the Palestinians, obviously, not only other Arab nations, not only many people within the left, within Israel, not only those of us in the United States who are concerned, not only people elsewhere in the world. Israel is going to have to address the basic fundamental moral flaw that is present. I want Israel to exist. But we are coming to a point where it's becoming very clear. It's coming to a head in a way more than it has ever before in the history of that country. And the United States has to stand on the side of human rights for all people. We must.
But thank you, Krona. So will she not be sending money then? That's the question I had. That was the question I had. And then also, so does she still believe in the two-state solution or not? Like, I felt like that was a roundabout answer. Like, that really puzzled me. She was like, well, it seems like it's hard to bring it to the table. But then she says the United States should be giving aid to both. And I want to explain there was something that Imani Oakley said on Twitter. I wish I still had the tweet, darn it. But I felt like she made a good comparison in reference to separate but equal. If you go back in the US, like go back to history, remember Plessy versus Ferguson established separate but equal. But then later on, Plessy versus Ferguson was overturned by Brown versus Board of Education because, studies showed that although Black people and white people were separate, the facilities were not equal. The schools weren't equal. And in reference to the education system, the medical system, like nothing was equal. Black people obviously had less, and it was in their facilities were in rough shape, right? So Imani Oakley pointed this out, and she brought up a really good point that, like, for the people who continue to push the two-state solution, that's like the equivalent to the idea of separate but equal that we had in the United States. And we've already known that that's been proven not to be the case, because what will happen, even with like the two-state solution, yeah, they'll be separate, but they won't be equal because the Palestinians are the minority now. Most of them have been pushed out or beaten or killed. And that needs to be said. And I think some of these candidates are afraid to say that because they know that big money is going to come in from AIPAC, and that is going to destroy their chance or their possibilities of actually winning. But you have to come forward and say that. You have to speak for the Palestinian people. Like, you got to just condemn it and be like, look, these people were brutalized. These people were murdered. They were taken out of their homes. They were pushed out. There's no nice way to say it. I'm just being real here. No nice way to say it. So I'm still confused. I don't know if she still wants to do two-state or not.
So shifting our attention to United States politics, given that that's where you're about to immerse yourself in, obviously when...
This is such a good point, Roger. Thank you for the super chat. You want Israel to exist, but do you want Palestine to exist? And this is a really good way of framing this, because I keep hearing people say what she just said, that they do want Israel to exist. But it's like, you're right. Like, where's the I do want Palestine to exist? Well said, Roger. Thank you so much for that. We're going to go into this part here, and then we're going to go to the next story.
When someone stands up like you're doing and saying, I'm going to run as a challenger representing the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, the model that comes to mind for a lot of people is Bernie Sanders, even though you're two different candidates and two different people. It seems like, I think it's fair to say you're more or less in the same lane, occupying the same kind of political faction within the Democratic Party. Bernie in 2016 and then again in 2020, according to a lot of his supporters, had his candidacy sabotaged in various ways. In 2016, even Donna Brazile and Elizabeth Warren said they thought the DNC rigged the election in favor of Hillary and against Bernie. And then in 2020, maybe it wasn't as dramatic, but clearly there was an establishment effort to get Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar out of the race at the critical time. Beto O'Rourke, all of them kind of unified. Elizabeth Warren stayed in longer than it seemed rational for her to do so, siphoning the votes, and then refused to endorse Bernie Sanders. So there,
because she was a snake, Glenn.
are a lot of people who say, even if you're able to galvanize people the way that Bernie did, bring a big movement behind you, the Democratic Party is such a corrupted party and institution that they will never let you win. They will even, in fact, cheat if they have to prevent you from winning the way that they did to Bernie. Do you think that is what happened in 2016 and or 2020? And if so, what is the hope that you can provide people that you have a chance to win within the Democratic Party?
Do you think they cheated Bernie? And what hope can you give people that you will survive in the Democratic Party?
It's clearly what happened in 2016, and it's clearly what happened in 2020. And remember, I was there too. So I have my own visceral experience of what they'll do if they feel that you're any kind of an inconvenience. And to be honest, I've only been running for 9 days, and I already see what they're doing to me now. So, yeah, you're right. But I also heard Cenk Uygur say something the other day, and I think it was true. He pointed out that Bernie came within striking distance, and he said, somebody is going to break through. Somebody, Glenn, is going to break through. Now, whether that will be me or not, even if I don't break through, if I'm pushing that much more, we have to, anytime we see it, it could be the labor movement, it could be somebody running as a progressive, it could be an NGO, it could be independent media. We all just have to support the pushing through. And at some point, somebody is going to. But I feel that if you're not running as a Democrat, you don't have quite the capacity to call the system on its own, tendency to rig. I mean, the fact that I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing, and then I can say, because I'm running as a Democrat, Joe Biden should debate me. That I can say, because I'm running as a Democrat, it should be the Democratic voters who decide what is the agenda and who is the best person to take on the Republican candidate in 2024. I can say that. I can be that inconvenience to them because I'm running as a Democrat. Now, I understand the blowback I'm getting. God knows I'm getting it. But I hope that people will understand the importance of supporting the person who's going out and saying that, because the only factor that can override this is we the people. And when I got out of the race in 2020, I said to my supporters that I would do everything I could going forward to inconvenience those who I feel need to be inconvenienced. This whole thing with political parties, they're not mentioned in the Constitution. George Washington warned us against them, said they would form factions of men more concerned with their party than with their country. John Adams said they were a threat to a democracy. Third-party voices have been extremely important in our history. At the same time, however, now Democrats and Republicans have sort of formed this unholy alliance to make it very difficult to run as an independent or as a third party.
I'll just say something really quick in reference to what she was saying about eventually somebody will break through. So that could take a long time, right? And I have a feeling that the person that does break through, by the time they do break through, they're not going to uphold those progressive policies. And I can see that happening with someone like Ro Khanna. I think Ro Khanna is going to run in 2028. And I think that if he does break through, just know that he is already sold out. Let's make that very clear. Just know that it's already have been decided that he's not going to push for Medicare for all. Those things aren't going to happen. They're not going to let him in. They're not going to let someone in who really wants to implemented something like Medicare for all by executive order, they're not going to put that person in, because then that will do away with big pharma. Big pharma donates to a lot of these politicians, which means that they could lose some of their seats. Like it's all connected to the money. And that's what people have to understand. And so when sometimes people get upset with me when I say that it doesn't matter who the person is, it's the system that's the problem. But that's the reality of the situation. You have these parties that are owned by corporations. But to her point, when she said eventually somebody is going to be able to break through in the Democratic Party, the best chance that we had of that happening for the presidential position was with Bernie Sanders. He had the numbers, he had the support. That really was our best shot. Now, maybe someday someone will come along and they'll be more popular than Bernie was. But like I said, if they get in, just know that means that the DNC is on their side. And if the DNC is on their side, then that means that they have already sold out before they even had a chance to get in. And that's important for people to fully grasp. But to that point, eventually someone's going to break through. All these years that we've been waiting for someone to break through, we could have already built a third party movement. This is the piece where me and Nick and CJ, this is what we push back on all this time. Like David Sirota said in an interview with Crystal and Kyle, he's been doing this for like decades. He's been trying to fight this for like decades. So it's like all this time, we could have already been building a third party movement. That is our point. Let's go on.
Person. So we just have to be in there wherever our heart leads us to. And I think being in there as a Democratic candidate, saying this is not 100 years ago, a bunch of men sitting around a table smoking cigars should not be just deciding Biden is the one. You know, that's what it was happening.
But that's what happens still today. And if you look up the DNC fraud lawsuit, like Nico House, he was the one that broke that story. That's still what happened. That's exactly still what happens today. It's already decided. It's already people have already chosen. They've already been selected. It's just a matter of whether or not the American people will come out. But most of the time, the person that's selected, the American people have been convinced to come out and support them. Bernie Sanders, for example, was not selected. Do you see what I mean? It's already been decided. They're already talking about who they got their picks for 2024 if Joe Biden don't run. They're already talking about they got their picks for 2028. Oh, I would love to see him and da-da-da-da. They've already chosen people. That has not changed.
Happened to the Democratic Party. We should be independent thinkers. What's this codependent relationship with the DNC? I think it should be the voters who should decide. And
if you want us to be independent thinkers, though, then you can't run through the two-party system. Not in politics. This is the part here that kind of rubbed me the wrong way too. And she said, like, what's this attachment to the DNC? That's part of the Democratic Party. That's part of it. So when you run through the Democratic Party, that's what you have to go. You have to deal with the DNC. That's just how it is. The people who were independent thinkers that were even remotely a part of the Democratic Party, they're all gone. They were pushed out. So anybody else like them that tries to come through, they block it.
I appreciate any support anyone gives me, and having the opportunity to say to the primary voters, I don't believe that anything short of a fundamental economic U-turn is what the American people deserve, what will beat the Republicans in 2024, and even more importantly, will repair this country. So this is not a time when we should be offering just a little. We should be offering a lot, because the people deserve it.
Right, and that was Bernie's argument in 2016 for sure, right, was we need a political revolution, not tinkering on the margins. And one of the reasons why Bernie succeeded so much more than anyone expected he would against the incredibly formidable and sometimes seemingly invulnerable Clinton political machine within the Democratic Party was because he was able to attract a huge number of voters, people forget in 2016, who are not kind of traditional Democratic voters. Lots of people who don't identify necessarily with the Democratic Party, who feel disaffected from the two-party system you were just describing. Yeah, and so, are you able to hear me?
No, I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah. So I was kind of saying that one of the reasons why Bernie did so well in 2016 is he attracted a lot of non-traditional Democratic voters, people who don't necessarily identify as Democrats, who feel disaffected from the political system and from both parties. What are is that part of your strategy to be able to speak to people who don't wake up every day and say, I'm part of the Democratic Party? And if so, what is your strategy for trying to reach those people?
Well, first of all, the word strategy. You know, Donald Trump didn't have a strategy. He hit a nerve. My only strategy, the truth is I understand it. I know that there are a lot of young people who, you know, they don't even have an institutional memory of a time when either party did much more than thwart their dreams. So I know that there are young people who hear this message. A lot of these sort of normie blue check Democrat types think that I don't even have a right to be there. It drives me crazy a little bit. The founders, James Madison, gave me the right to be there with a little help from Susan B. Anthony. This idea that other people don't have a right. It's like sometimes I feel like the Democratic Party is intent on shrinking itself, on shrinking its own base. So
yeah, I mean, they don't really care because they just want to fundraise. Like, that's really what it comes down to. If they lose, it doesn't matter because they still were able to fundraise. And I think, you know, it goes back to the question that he asked, like, what is the strategy?
I am saying, you know, when I first started my career as a writer, there was, I assume he's still around, a writer named Arnold Patton. And I read something he said. He said, if you genuinely have something you need to say, there is someone out there who genuinely needs to hear it. That is what has always guided my career. I think there are some things that need to be said in this country. We need to say that the economic system is rigged, that only 20% of Americans have an easy time in this country, and that if you're living in that 20% where the economy is pretty good for you, you were surrounded by 80% of Americans who are living in a vast sea of economic despair, where 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt, where 68,000 Americans die every year from lack of health care, where 18 million Americans cannot fill the prescriptions that their doctors give to them.
But I think the problem is everything that she's saying right now, these are all things that Bernie Sanders said. And they still prevented him from getting it. You see the problem? So I think that's why when Glenn asked her, like, what is your strategy? And she says, well, you know, I don't really look at a strategy. Like, no, like, because you're saying the same things that Bernie Sanders said. So you need to have a strategy. Because as you see, Bernie did it twice in a row and he still couldn't get in. We'll finish up with this.
Half of our seniors live on $25,000 and less a year, where 1/3 of American workers are living on less than $15 an hour and cannot find a place to live. Someone needs to say that. Someone needs to name the corruption of the economic system that keeps that in place. Someone needs to name the legalized bribery that is the essence of the political system at this time. And somebody needs to say to the American people, vote for me, and we can change that.
So just on the last topic,
we have to stop there. Sorry, guys. But the thing is that someone did say all those things. I don't know. I'll take the comment on Rockfin and then we'll go to our last story. If you are just joining, don't forget to take that poll and then we'll reveal those poll results. Thank you for the tip, Roger. Sab, if you had to guess between America getting embarrassed by China outcompeting us and politicians, donors in the form of YouTube crying to them, saying TikTok's kicking our ass, please do something, government. What percentage would you say belongs to one versus the other? Question 2, the pushback against you critiquing AOC. Do you think that you're getting less pushback from AOC stance today than in years past? Yeah, I do think it has decreased somewhat. I think like a year ago it was worse. A year ago when I used to call these things out about like AOC or any of the squad members, how they were voting, and people were just like, I needed to be more patient and yada yada and all that jazz. But it's not as many people doing that today, I would say. I think for anyone who still had that hope left, And now she still has a big base, but I think for those who still thought that it could be a something, but they may have been like, maybe they had 1 foot in the door and 1 foot in the room and 1 foot like out the door. I think that railroad strike, or breaking the railroad strike, I think that did it for a lot of people. That did it for a lot of them. All right, let me go to these comments and we'll get to our next story. Bill says no blank check, just continuous billion-dollar checks indefinitely, which is not the same or something. The Oracle says Marianne needs to take several seats. It is clear that she's not ready to reckon with the truth in the way that will contrast sharply enough with Biden. Right. And that's one of the things that Nick was hitting on. Delthea, Zelensky wants troops on the ground. He then wants to stand behind American service members and talk trash to Putin, like the drunk who starts fights, then whispers to his friends, hold me back. That's funny. That's funny. Joe says China's government is feudalism and its economy is capitalism. AJF, thank you so much for the super chat. AOC especially can't be getting away with what she's doing now when she stated the opposite. Literally has stated we need to raise a ruckus. Yeah, she did say that. Jeremy said Marianne is no Jill Stein. No. All right, Eric, if we can go ahead to the last story, the TikTok versus Meta, because JB and I were talking about the TikTok hearings yesterday on RBN, and there was something else that I wanted to point out. I didn't get a chance to because we ran out of time. So I'm actually going to point out that piece here tonight. And it's that there's another reason why this is happening. And it's not just because the U.S. government is afraid that China's watching us, that song, I always feel like somebody's watching me or whatever. It's not just because of that. There's other reasons too. And there's one that I feel has not been talked about enough. And I'm going to bring that up tonight. And that has to do with Mark Zuckerberg and Meta and their hand in this. But first, I do want to show you some of the highlights from the hearing yesterday, because some of the questions were just absolutely ridiculous. Now, this is Mr. Shou Chew yesterday. And you know what's funny? A lot of people that have been talking about this have worded it this way. Congress grills TikTok CEO. The questions that they were asking him, most of those questions were ridiculous, but here we go.
I'm making the following commitments to you and to all our users. Number one, we will keep safety, particularly for teenagers, as a top priority for us. Number two, we will firewall protected US data from unwanted foreign access. Number three, TikTok will remain a place for free expression and will not be manipulated by any government. And fourth, we will be transparent and we will give access to third-party independent monitors to remain accountable for our commitments.
So, Mr. Chu, if the CCP tells ByteDance to turn over all data that TikTok has collected inside the US, even within Project Texas, do they have to do so, according to Chinese law?
Congressman, first, I'm Singaporean.
That's fine, but there are employees of yours and ByteDance's in China.
We understand this concern.
So, Mr. Chu, would TikTok be prepared to divest from ByteDance and Chinese Communist Party ties?
I don't think ownership is the...
See how I don't like that phrase? This is why it bothers me. See, Marianne was using the same phrase that they're using, that Chinese Communist Party. I don't like that. Again, I feel like it is red baiting.
The issue here, with a lot of respect, American social companies don't have a good track record with data privacy and user security. I mean, look at Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. Just one example.
The Chinese government has that data.
Congresswoman, I have seen no evidence that the Chinese government has access to that data. They have never asked us. We have not provided.
I find that actually preposterous.
Our commitment is to move the data into the United States to be stored on American soil by an American company, overseen by American personnel. So the risk will be similar to any government going to an American company asking for data. We also commit to be free of all and any government manipulation. This is something that, as far as I understand, no other company, including American companies, are willing to go. So maybe this is something that we can ask the industry to provide, not just us.
can you say with 100% certainty that TikTok does not use the phone's camera to determine whether the content that elicits a pupil dilation should be amplified by the algorithm?
What in the hell? What in the hell? Are you kidding me? Oh,
Do not collect body, face, or voice data to identify our users. The only face data that you'll get, that we collect, is when you use the filters to have, say, sunglasses on your face. We need to know where your eyes are. And
Why do you need to know what the eyes are if you're not seeing if they're dilated?
And that data is stored on your local device and deleted after use if you use it for facial. Again, we do not collect body, face, or voice data to identify our users.
Mr. Chu, has ByteDance spied on Americans at the direction of the Chinese Communist Party?
I don't think that spying is the right way to describe it.
All right.
This is ultimately...
We can differ on that.
This is ultimately...
If I have a TikTok app on my phone and my phone is on my home Wi-Fi network, does TikTok access that network?
It will have to access the network to get connections to the internet.
That was the dumbest question. Does TikTok get access to my internet? Are you turning on your Wi-Fi? Like, that's with any app. With any app. I'm honestly convinced over a lot of the hearings that I've heard that our congressmen and women don't use apps. I don't think they've used Twitter. I don't think they use TikTok. I don't think some of them even know what a Facebook is. Like, based on these hearings that I've heard, they ask the dumbest questions, completely out of touch.
That's the question.
Is it possible then that it could access other devices on that home Wi-Fi network?
Congressman, we do not do anything that is beyond any industry norms. I believe the answer to your question is no.
Okay, so I felt like they were really hard on him. I think like they were being ridiculous. They were trying to make things worse than they actually are. I mean, you could say the same thing about other apps. You could say it about Facebook, Instagram. You could say it about Snapchat. Is it Snapchat? Snapchat. I don't use that one. They can say it about Snapchat. They can say it about Spotify. They can say it about any of these apps that are on your phone, but they're focusing on this one because it was not made in the United States. And they do feel like China is again a threat. But it's not just because they feel like China is an economic threat. It's not just because of the whole Communist Party issue. There's a third problem. And that third problem is Mark Zuckerberg. Now, you may wonder, what does Congress have to do with that? And why would they be concerned about how Mark Zuckerberg feels about Meta not performing too well since TikTok has entered the scene? But I'm going to show you how Congress is connected. Now, here's a clip here. And this is talking about Meta shares. It's talking about Meta versus Facebook. Now we're getting into the financial ramifications that have happened since TikTok came on the scene.
All the prints, listen to the call, you thought what?
Well, it's interesting, Andrew, because if you go back a few quarters ago, it was really the first time that Mark Zuckerberg got up onto an earnings call and said, look, we're facing this incredible threat called TikTok. If you remember, that was in late January of 2022. And it was...
Notice how it was referred to as a threat.
So interesting to hear him yesterday basically talk about how their substantial investments in Reels and sort of the shift to making Facebook and Instagram more video-centric was actually increasing time spent on both of those apps. I don't think most investors believe that. I think most investors have looked at sort of Facebook and Instagram as sort of losers relative to the growth of TikTok. And so here's Mark trying to come out after sort of looking vulnerable earlier in the year, saying, no, we're actually growing share. We're actually taking time spent. And, you know, at the same time, it's not translating into revenue, right? Like, obviously, revenue is going in the wrong direction.
So even though he was still gaining shares, they weren't actually making money anymore. They weren't making much money. Hence, that explains why now if you notice, Facebook, or Meta, Facebook, whatever you want to call it these days, they are now on their second round of layoffs within the past couple of months, past 3 months. They are now on their second round of layoffs. The first one, which I think was at the end of November, they laid off 10,000 people. Now they announced they're laying off 11,000 people, because that was the thing, is that they weren't accumulating that revenue anymore once TikTok started to blow up. That's what it was really about. Now I'm going to get into how this connects to Congress in just a second.
Part of that's obviously the economy. Part of that is obviously some of the Apple privacy changes that were made. But I think investors are having a hard time footing sort of what's happening in the business versus sort of the way the company's presenting themselves and sort of what is the real story of what does
so what do you Rich, what do you think the real story is? Which is to say, do you think, I, by the way, find myself spending more and more time on Instagram, sort of, trapped in this vortex of reels and video. But at the same time, we were talking about the ad load, significantly less, I think even significantly less than what you're seeing on TikTok, unless it's just that there's so much more volume on TikTok.
I also think at the end of the day, it's less about just pure time spent right now. I also think the hot new object in town, the platform everybody wants to be a part of that has far faster growth. Facebook may not be losing time spent, but they're certainly losing on a relative growth basis. TikTok is definitely growing faster. And I think advertisers, Andrew, are gravitating towards that medium. But all of this is sort of a sideshow to the fact that while revenue growth is slowing, while the core product has these questions, they are gunning the spending, basically, one, to improve the core apps, because you heard a lot about AI last night. So they're spending a lot on AI, and that's to catch TikTok. There is no doubt that is all about catching TikTok from an algorithm standpoint. And then two, plowing forward and spending more and more on the metaverse that, just like your opening comments, Andrew, I don't think most investors believe in this investment, maybe they believe in it, but they believe it's uninvestable over the course of the next 5+ years, so because this is 10 years out.
Okay, so two things. Core platform, do you think that is a fixable situation where all of a sudden, a year from now, we're going to be having a different conversation about Instagram, Facebook, Reels, all of this?
I think it's very challenging because I don't think the core creativity, if you talk to creators right now, I think they find TikTok to be a far more creative platform. And I don't think this is just a comment purely on Instagram Reels. I think you'd say the same thing about YouTube Shorts and the same thing about Snapchat Spotlight.
Shepard. Okay, so this video, this was released 4 months ago. That was CNBC. Okay. All right. So they were talking about the concerns then in reference to Meta versus TikTok. And I want to say something really quick before we go into the congressional portion of this as well. I want to explain to you that Facebook is boring. Dun, dun, dun. Facebook is boring. I'm sorry. I feel like I was really into it, I don't know, 10 years ago. But it just, over time, it just never really, it became kind of stale. And then I saw the same things over and over. It's so-and-so playing with their dog, and so-and-so's cat is on the window. Look at my cat. Look at my kid that graduated from high school. Look at my friend that did this. Look at it got boring over time. And I felt like they didn't find a way to keep younger viewers engaged. That's what Facebook kind of failed with. They didn't find a way to engage that Gen Z generation, and honestly, part of the millennial generation as well. Now, when I go on Facebook, because usually when I go on there, I just post my live streams. I'll share my video clips. I'll share my live streams on my Sabby Sabs Facebook page and my personal Facebook page. That's it. Every now and then I'll say happy birthday, but I am not engaged on Facebook the way I used to be, because it's boring. You're boring, Mark. So that being said, I'm not crazy active on TikTok either. I may not always post on there, but I'll still look at the videos on TikTok. I think the videos are pretty cool and things like that. But long story short, TikTok found a way to keep particularly younger people engaged. in a short amount of time. And so, yeah, Facebook has competition. And if you notice, that's why now if you go on Facebook, you'll see they have this category called Facebook Reels, where now you can create reels, which are similar to like the TikTok videos that you see. See, they're trying to do that same thing. YouTube jumped on that bandwagon too, man. YouTube saw like, wait a minute, TikTok's really taking off. Let's monetize YouTube Shorts. So that's why you'll see us doing like YouTube Shorts now, because they're really, really pushing those. But this also goes into and I really want you to see this because I think this is very important. Open secrets, one of my faves. 1 second. Sorry about that. Meta. Let's see how Meta relates to Congress. Now, this is just looking at the 2022 cycle. So let's see. I'm going to show you the graphs because I think it's easier to see it that way. First of all, I want to let you know that they donate to both groups. You'll see sources from individuals, sources from organization. You'll see how much they donated to candidates, right? But this is nothing because I'm going to take you back in just a second. But I just want you to see average contributions to members of the House, 1990 to 2022. You'll see here the blue line are the Democrats, obviously, going all the way over to 2022. You see it's starting to drop down a little bit here. And then same thing for the Republicans, which is the red line, going all the way over to 2022. So you can see that they donate to both parties. Now, let's scroll down. Even when we look at the Senate, it looks like they donate a lot more to the Senate, right? For the Democrats, not so much for the Republicans. But that's not even the piece that I want you to see. I want you to see lobbying. This part here is crucial. 2021, if you look at the revolving door, it says 65 out of 72 Meta lobbyists in 2021 have previously held government jobs. That's important for people to understand. 2022, revolving door, 66 out of 75 Meta lobbyists in 2022 have previously held government jobs. They are in the government. So they have the lobbyists. And then we're going to go to 2020 because I want to show you a difference. I think 2020 is where I saw the most of it. Yeah, let's go to top recipients. Let's go to 2020. Look at this, guys. 2020 top recipients from Meta. You have Joe Biden, the DNC. Oh, look at that. They donate to the DNC. They donate to John Ossoff, Bernie Sanders, Raphael Warnock, Fair Fight PAC, Jamie Harrison, Teresa Greenfield, Tech for Campaigns, Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Let me see if it'll let me. I'll come back up to that. And then if we scroll down, actually, no, I want to go back up. I'm sorry. Let's come up here. For the 2022, I wish I had like a pen or a pen where I could just circle this. For the 2022 cycle, when it comes to lobbying, you need to understand it ranks 10 out of 9,073 in 2022. Look how much money. Look at this, guys. Look at this. Millions of dollars. Over 19 million 2022, over 20 million 2021. If we go over to contributions, ranks 302 out of 30,570. Over 2 million, 0 for outside spending. Now, let me change it to 2020 really quick. Here we go. Contributions, over 7 million. Lobbying, over 19 million in 2020, over 16 million in 2019. So you guys see the problem here? They're all up in the government. They have lobbyists. That's Facebook. That's Meta. Does it make sense now? So this is why, and if we want to go back up to, you can actually just click on a tab that'll just take you straight to lobbying. And this is the chart I want you to see. I'm going to zoom out just a tad. Annual lobbying totals, 1998 to 2022. By the way, this is up in the millions. And you can see over the years what Facebook started in 2008, right? So here's 2009. So even from the very beginning, they were already starting to have lobbyists. They were already starting to do it. Let me zoom. I want to make it so you can still see. I guess you can't see both at the same time. But anyway, this is the lobbying profile, right? 2011. And you notice that it increases over the years. There was a small dip in 2016, and then it increases 2017, 2018, keeps going up 2020, goes up a little bit 2021, and then it went down a little bit in 2022. They are lobbying. Their lobbying totals, even right now, is over $19 million. So what you have to understand is that those congressmen and women, some of them, they're in the pocket of Mark Zuckerberg. So if Facebook is having some problems economically because TikTok is the new thing on the scene and TikTok has become more popular, and it's causing Facebook to have revenue issues, that means that these people, the lobbyists, are also going to have some issues. And that means that these politicians are going to have some issues too. Look at this. These are bills that they lobbied. Bills. And not the kind of bills that you have to pay. Not the bills, not the can you pay my bills. But these are bills that Meta has been a part of. I'm not going to read through all of them, but you see all this? So they're deep up in it. And so this is why I believe this is the other missing piece as to why Congress is pressing TikTok the way that they are. Again, if you follow the money, a lot of times it'll lead you right back to it. Okay, we are going to do call-in tonight. It won't be a long call-in. I'm not going to be up till 3 a.m. I do have like a birthday thing for a family member tomorrow. But what can I tell you? I don't know what to say. Like, it's just follow the money. Follow the money. All right, Eric. I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break. I'll come back. We'll do call in. And if you want to go ahead and reveal the poll results too. By the way, those of you who said yes, that TikTok should be banned in America, I want to talk to you tonight on call in. I want to know why.
Yes, that's the big question. All right, let's show the poll. All right, so by the way, I'm Eric. I'm here while Sabby has a little break before we'll be jumping into call-in, which I put the link in the chat. And yeah, you can do call-in on your browser or on your cell phone. If you're in there, just search for Sabby Sabs. Now let's look. Let's move this around. Look, the poll results. All right, so for tonight's Sabby Sab poll with 375 votes, we have, do you feel TikTok should be banned in the U.S.? And yeah, Bad Cookies is distracting me. I'll get to him in a minute. Do you feel TikTok should be banned in the U.S.? We had 18% said yes, 71% said no, and 11% said not sure. And yeah, that 18%, we want to talk to you. So we'll be talking about that when we want to hear from you in the call-in, and you can talk about TikTok and this poll. You can talk about any of the other stories, or you can talk about really anything you want. Now, Mr. Bad, what did he post here? Oh yeah, all right, here we go. At least Eric isn't wearing that horrible Red Sox sweater. Yeah, we all talk to you and call in. Bad Cookies. We'll see if you can got anything to back your words up. All right, so what have we been talking about tonight? Yeah, of course, the whole TikTok thing. And in the meta spending, and of course it always comes down to the money. It's yeah, I mean, when you look at those numbers for Meta and just the amount that they're spending, it's how can you have a real democracy when when we're putting in our little 15 bucks here, when you got these huge corporations putting in literally billions. And so that's something we got to deal with. I mean, to me, that's the core problem. It's the problem we got to solve, that we got to focus on, and that's also a problem we can build a movement around, because everybody agrees that Congress is corrupt. So I want us to be talking more about doing something about that. One other thing I wanted to mention in talking about call-in, a person in the chat in the earlier show that Sabby had at 6 said that they didn't use call-in because they didn't want to give them their phone number. And yes, call-in, the app as a default likes you to put your phone number in, but you don't have to use it that way. You can use call-in with an email address, and then they send a code to your email address and you log in that way. So that's the way I use it, because yeah, I'm not big on putting my phone number in either. So yeah, I do jump into the call-in coming soon when Sabby will return to say a few more words here, and then we jump into call-in, and I should see you all in there as well. So let's see, we were talking about earlier tonight, the Paris strikes and the Paris and the retirement and whatnot. And there's this whole idea of like what work is and what work should be. And I feel like we don't do enough as a left movement in our little corner of the lefties to make clear, or to say what our vision is for a better world. And I think our vision should entail that work should be optional, just as a basic thing. This is how the 1%ers live, and of course, the ones richer than that, and we can have that kind of a world is what I'm trying to propose, and I think our left movement should be saying. Our country is huge in resources and in manpower and all this stuff, and we don't have to have this brutal hellscape that we have, and that is continuing. And so what I'm saying is let's paint the vision of a world where you don't have to be toiling at some shitty job, 10 hours a day, every work day. It should be more of a world where you can work and do the things that you enjoy and that are your passions, and that you don't have to worry about that your housing and your medical care and your education is all dependent on how fast you run on that hamster wheel. Those things should be provided. And yeah, if you want to be a real high-end person and do a whole bunch of extra stuff and make great products or things like that, then fine, you can get a little more in that, and you can get extra for that. But this idea that you're basically pummeled and crushed without unless you enrich some billionaire is one of the core problems that I feel like we need to face and kind of address. So there we go. All right.
Did we get these?
Oh no, I didn't. Caught me sleeping. You want me to do them, or do you want to?
I can do them. Thanks, HAF, for the super chat. AOC especially can't be getting away with what she's doing now when she stated the opposite. Literally has stated that we need to raise the... Oh, yeah, I did say that one. Sorry. Oh, this one. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. Thank you, Sabs. Yes, there's never been a true communist country. It's so far been a marketing use of the HTE term. It's centralized state control of the economy. Exactly. We have never had a true communist country. That's important for people to understand. All right, we are going on over to Colin. So I want to hear your takes on this. This is episode 92. TikTok hearing pushes China fears. Yikes. The TikTok hearing was cringe to say the least. Is the criticism of TikTok's data, whoopsie, I forgot the T, data access fair? Does this increase America's fear of China? So I'll see you guys over there on Call-In. And other than that, I will be back on Sunday. I'm on a time crunch, so let's do this one really quick. Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the tip, Rock on Rockfin Roger. Kit on Larry's show earlier. I'll tell you what I told them. When the soil, aka system, has been poisoned, you can pull up trees, aka politicians that have rotted, and put another tree in its place all you want. At the end of the day, you're not changing anything because each healthy new tree put in its place will rot too. Until you're ready to change the soil, this will continue. Some of us recognize this, others don't. Yeah, that's a good point. All right, guys, let's go ahead and head on over to Call-In. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. And you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.